Professor Dershowitz, thank you for joining us on I24 News. Now, there are senior figures in this incoming government in Israel who insist that this court override law be put into effect, be passed. Why are you speaking out against it?
It would be a terrible mistake. The Israeli Supreme Court is the gem of legal systems around the world, and it's absolutely essential that they maintain the power to imply the rule of law without the Knesset being able to interfere on a 61-59 vote. Let me give you an example. Recently, potential Minister Ben Gvir has said that he would like different rules of engagement for rock throwers, depending solely on whether they're Arabs or whether they're Jews. And that is clearly illegal and improper, and the Supreme Court would probably so hold. To allow the Knesset to overrule that by 61 votes would really undercut the rule of law, the commitment of Israel to equality, and there are many other examples of the Supreme Court rendering important decisions based on human rights, based on equality, based on basic laws, and the Knesset should not have the power just to overrule those decisions by a simple majority. It's not broken. The Supreme Court is working very effectively both to protect Israeli citizens and also to help Israel in the court of public opinion and in the courts of law, and it should not be tampered with.
But there are those, the proponents of this law said there are democracies, they point to Canada, that do allow legislations to overrule court decisions, and they say the Supreme Court has been interventionist in many cases. How do you respond to them?
Well, every Supreme Court is interventionist, and people always complain about Supreme Courts. Today in the United States, the complaint comes from the left. They think the Supreme Court is too far right. In Israel, they think the Supreme Court is too far left. In many countries in the world, there's a big dispute about it. But in Israel, the attempt is simply not to create structural changes, but to lean the Supreme Court to the right, and if the Supreme Court won't lean to the right, to make it responsive to the Knesset. It would be a very bad mistake. Every country is different, and Israel has a wonderful system of justice. Canada isn't held before the criminal court the way Israel is. It isn't attacked in the court of public opinion. Israel has a unique situation, and the Supreme Court of Israel plays a unique role in protecting Israel from both international intrusions and also protecting the rights of citizens, Arab and Jewish alike.
Now, Professor Dershowitz, you have a relationship with Benjamin Netanyahu. You've advised him on other matters. Have you spoken about this with him, and what has been his reaction, if so?
Well, I've known Benjamin Netanyahu for 50 years, and I've spoken to him probably for 10 years about this subject. This is not the first time it's come up, and we had a very frank talk about it the other day. He listened very carefully. He said he wants to strike the appropriate balance. That doesn't mean he's going to accept my point of view on all these issues, but he certainly was willing to hear my point of view, and he thanked me for expressing it. He wants there to be a debate about this, and he wants to make sure that there's an appropriate balance struck in the end.
Right now, Professor Dershowitz, you've been a fervent defender of Israel in, let's say, the public sphere over the years. You mentioned, for example, the changes that Itamar Ben Gvir wants to make in the open fire laws. Are you concerned about this and maybe other decisions that could be taken by the incoming government that would make it harder for you to defend Israel in the, let's say, international arena of public opinion?
Without a doubt. If the Ben Gvir rule ever came into effect, Israel would be indicted and convicted, and its soldiers would be indicted and convicted by the International Court for applying a different set of standards and principles based on race and ethnicity. And very few people could defend that argument. I could certainly not defend that argument. I defend many of Israel's actions, not all of which I always agree with, but this is one I could not defend. I don't think any decent person could ever defend a racist and racial distinction based purely on ethnicity as to when a rock thrower can be shot or just arrested. That's just basically wrong.
Right, and let me just ask you then, there are those who will say that this new government, and they're going just beyond this or that decision, risks undermining democracy or the rule of law, let's say, within Israel. Do you have an overall opinion on that?
I don't think this new government will undermine the rule of law. This new government is very much like Republicans in the United States. When I meet some of the people on the right, they have points of view that are very similar to points of view by right-wing Republicans in the United States. There's no fear, I think, realistically with Benjamin Netanyahu as prime minister that Israel will become a country that violates the rule of law. Look, no country in history faced with threats comparable to those faced by Israel has ever had a better record of human rights, a better record of compliance with the rule of law, and more concern for the enemy civilians. And I think that tradition will be maintained because that's what the people of Israel want. And that's what the people of Israel have demanded of their government, and the government has given them that, and Israelis should be very proud of the human rights record. It's not perfect. No country is perfect. But considering the threats that Israel faces from Iran, from Hezbollah, from Hamas, from local terrorists, Israel has done a very good job, thanks in large part to the Supreme Court of Israel, which has insisted that all branches of the Israeli government, including the military, comply with the rule of law. And the military in Israel is one of the best in terms of complying with the rule of law.
All right, Professor Alan Dershowitz, thank you for joining us on i24 News.
Thank you so much.